The History of Poland Podcast, Episode 4, Adalbert's Demise. Hello everyone. Last week, we left off with Adalbert bidding a fond farewell to his friend Bolesław, the Duke of Poland, and making his way north to evangelize those pagan Prussians. Now, before we continue on, I bet you're wondering, what does a missionary do in medieval Europe? Well, the answer depends on where you are and what time period you're talking about. For missionaries at the time of Adalbert, their practices would fall into two camps, Latin or Byzantine Christianity. For Adalbert, with his close ties to the emperor, the pope, and Rome, he was obviously very surely going to follow in the footsteps of other Latin missionaries. The best description that I could find of what a Latin missionary did is from a study by Richard Sullivan in his analysis, Early Medieval Missionary Activity, a comparative study of Eastern and Western methods. In his analysis, Sullivan states, quote, Western civilization had not made so strong an impression on surrounding barbarism as had Greek civilization. Consequently, the missionary was obliged to demonstrate through his own labors the superiority of his culture. For instance, as soon as they entered pagan areas, Western missionaries began to dot the land with new churches which they themselves built. Undoubtedly, this was an impressive feat in the eyes of those whose places of worship largely consisted of open-air temples and secluded forest spots. End quote. Sullivan then goes on to describe that the missionaries would build monasteries as well, since it would involve showing off things like clearing and cultivating unused land, planting vineyards, metalworking, milling, stone construction, and other skills. These would be designed to impress the potential converts. Then, the missionaries would combine these activities with a big display of the strength of Christianity. They would publicly destroy a pagan temple, make big shows about the weakness of the pagan gods, and give sermons showing the developed logic of Christianity compared to the local religions. While we don't know if these activities were a part of Adalbert's plan, it wouldn't have been unheard of for him to follow the same script. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To start his journey, Adalbert stopped off at the port city of Gdansk and baptized a large number of people, celebrated Mass, and saved up supplies for his journey. Then, he said goodbye to everyone, got into a ship, and disappeared, never to be seen by them again. He sailed for a few days, and when he disembarked, he thanked the boatman, said farewell to the rest of his companions, including, importantly, the armed escort that Bolesław had lent him, and set off with only two friends, a priest and a childhood friend. Their first stop was a little round island in the middle of a river. Sadly, this island was owned by somebody, and that somebody did not take kindly to these random German dudes showing up and setting up camp on his land. So the owners came by, beat them up a little bit, and at one point took a boat paddle and smacked Adalbert on the back while he was reading some psalms. The book went flying, Adalbert went flying, and everything was chaotic. Not surprisingly, they left the island, only to be hauled back later that same day. Adalbert and his friend were brought before a crowd of people who seemed to have been a bit upset by them showing up out of nowhere and demanded to know why they were there. Adalbert responded, quote, I am a Slav by birth, Adalbert by name, a monk by profession, and once a bishop by rank, but now, by my function, your apostle. Your salvation is the purpose of our journey, that you abandon your deaf and dumb idols and recognize your Maker, who alone is God, and besides whom there is no other, and that you may come to life, believing in his name, and be found worthy to receive the reward of celestial joys in the imperishable dwellings. Thus spoke Adalbert. The account continues, quote, They, however, by now quite enraged, raised a terrible row, shouting blasphemous words at him, and threatened to kill him. And right on the spot they started hitting the ground with their sticks, giving his head a nudge or two with their cudgels, and for a long time gnashed their gruesome teeth at him. You should think yourself very lucky, they said, that you have made it so far undisturbed. Only a quick departure may give you some hope to stay alive. If you stay here even a little longer, you will not escape certain death. This entire realm to which we stand as gateway, and we ourselves obey one common law, and have one single way of life. But you, who have a different law, unknown to us, will lose your heads tomorrow if you do not go away tonight. End quote. Adalbert and his companions took the hint again and went to a nearby village for 5 days, waiting to figure out their next steps. The morning dawned when they were to set out under a red sky. My mom always told me that red sky at night, sailors delight, red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. But unfortunately, they probably didn't have that warning at the time, and so they carried on with their journey, much to the later chagrin of Adalbert and his companions. They journeyed until midday, when Adalbert and his friends celebrated Mass, sang some psalms, and they lay down to take a nap. After all, journeying must be pretty exhausting. The original account continues here, telling us, quote, Here he fell asleep, and, since he was exhausted because of the long journey, sleep-bringing peace poured over him as if from a well-stocked horn. When at last they were all at rest, the pagan frenzy sprung up, and the Prussians rushed against them suddenly, throwing them all into chains." End quote. After being chained up, Adalbert tried to encourage his friends, saying, "What can be so strong? What can be so beautiful as laying down a well-pleasing life?" Right as he was saying these encouraging words, it appears that a, quote, "fiery red-haired assassin sprang, and, throwing a huge spear with all his force, pierced him deeply through his heart. That man, a priest of the idols and the leader of the sworn company, as if this were his duty, inflicted the first wounds." End quote. The account continues with a very graphic description of his repeated stabbing, dismemberment, and beheading. The Prussians may have thought this would be the end of the story of Adalbert, but that is not the case, because Adalbert has friends, as we know, in the forms of Otto III and Bolesław of Poland. Two things happen at about the same time. First, Bolesław hears that his friend Adalbert has been brutally murdered by pagans in Prussia. He then sends some emissaries north, negotiates a price, and pays for Adalbert's remains for their weight in gold. He then has the body taken to the Gniezno cathedral and laid to rest with all appropriate honors. The second thing is that while Otto is in Italy, he hears that his friend has been martyred in Prussia and laid to rest in Poland. According to one account, Otto rejoiced at Adalbert's death, not because he was dead, but that because he was a martyr, it meant he had a powerful friend and advocate in heaven that he could pray to. So, while in Italy, Otto convinces the Pope to canonize Adalbert, which is why we now know him as Saint Adalbert. It's at this point in time that Otto begins to consider Poland more thoughtfully. He's fought alongside them, and they are his nominal ally, but he didn't really have a handle on how powerful they were or what they were like. He knew Italy, he knew Germany, he knew Bohemia, but Poland was still a little bit of a mystery. And this latest evidence that they had a ruler who would pay for a body's weight in gold, no questions asked, raised the question of just how rich his neighbor was. Otto decided that rumors weren't good enough and that he was going to need to check out Bolesław's kingdom firsthand. He set off for Poland in March of the year 1000, and the entire spectacle is set down for us by our old friend Gallus Anonymous. Now, this is a little bit of a lengthy quote, but it captures the entire scene quite nicely. Quote, "Bolesław received him with the honor and ceremony with which such a distinguished guest, a king and Roman emperor, should fittingly be received. Marvelous and wonderful sights Bolesław set before the emperor when he arrived, the ranks first of the knights in all their variety, and then of the princes, lined up on a spacious plain like choirs, each separate unit set apart by the distinct and varied colors of its apparel, and no garment there was of inferior quality, but of the most precious stuff that might anywhere be found. For in Bolesław's time every knight and every lady of the court wore robes instead of garments of linen or wool, nor did they wear in his court any precious furs, however new, without robes and orphery. For gold in his days was held by all to be as common as silver, and silver deemed as little worth as straw. So, when the Roman emperor beheld his glory and power and richness, he exclaimed in admiration, 'By the crown of my empire, the things I behold are greater than I had been led to believe.' And after taking counsel with his magnates, he added before the whole company, 'Such a great man does not deserve to be styled duke or count like any of the princes, but to be raised to a royal throne and adorned with a diadem in glory.' And with these words he took the imperial diadem from his own head and laid it upon the head of Bolesław in pledge of friendship, and as a triumphal banner he gave him as a gift one of the nails from the cross of our Lord with the lance of St. Maurice, and in return Bolesław gave to him an arm of St. Adalbert. And in such love they were united that day, that the emperor declared him his brother and partner in the empire, and called him a friend and ally of the Roman people. And what is more, he granted him and his successors authority over whatever ecclesiastical honors belonged to the empire in any part of the kingdom of Poland, or other territories he had conquered or might conquer among the barbarians, and a decree about this arrangement was confirmed by Pope Sylvester in a privilege of the Holy Church of Rome. So Bolesław was thus gloriously raised to kingship by the emperor, and he gave an example of the liberality innate in him when, for 3 days following his coronation, he celebrated a feast in style fit for a king or emperor. Every day the plate and the tableware were new, and many different ones were given out, ever richer again. For at the end of the feast he ordered the waiters and the cupbearers to gather the gold and silver vessels, for there was nothing made of wood there, from all 3 days' courses, that is, the cups and goblets, the bowls and plates, and the drinking horns, and he presented them to the emperor as a token of honor, and not as a princely tribute. His servants were likewise told to collect the wall hangings and the coverlets, the carpets and tablecloths and napkins, and everything that had been provided for their needs, and take them to the emperor's quarters. In addition, he presented many other vessels of gold and silver and of diverse workmanship, and robes of various hues and ornaments never seen before, precious stones, and so many other marvelous things that the emperor regarded such presents as a miracle. Each of his princes was given presents of such magnificence that from being friendly, they now became closest friends. But who could count what and how many presents he gave to all the lords, so that not a single servant out of all the multitude went away without a gift? The emperor returned home delighted with the lavish gifts." End quote. Well, that was quite the quote. Following this meeting, according to one source, Bolesław and Otto head to the tomb of Charlemagne in Germany, and Otto presented the throne of Charlemagne to Bolesław, who then in turn gave Otto the gift of a contingent of Polish bodyguards. And as is always the case when you give somebody a bunch of people to protect their lives, they became friends for life. But what did this friendship really mean? Well, during Otto's life, it meant that Poland was on the same footing as Germany and Italy. That meant it was a sovereign kingdom, but one that was under the authority of the Pope and Emperor. Interestingly, this meant that it was above Bohemia, which was more of just a part of the German kingdom at this point in time. In many ways, it was a promotion of Poland. However, Otto died very shortly after these events, which we call the Congress of Gniezno, and the throne passed to someone who was not as fond of Bolesław or the idea of independent Polish sovereignty. So while Otto lived, this was a sign that things were swell, but when he died, it was just a fond memory of Bolesław's. The one lasting impact of this event was that Poland was granted an independent church. I really can't understate the importance of this move. Instead of being put under the authority of the archbishoprics in Germany, as certainly could have happened, Poland was given its own authority over heavenly matters inside of its jurisdiction, and all future jurisdictions that it might conquer. Not answerable to the German Church, but answerable to the Pope directly. This was the founding of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Gniezno, which still exists today, along with 3 additional regional dioceses in Polish cities that would answer to Gniezno. For the next few hundred years, this would have a lasting effect. Polish armies may fail, and the national political power may wax and wane, but at the end of the day, the Polish people would still have their locally run church to rally around. And when time came to reestablish the political sovereignty of Poland, as Poland would do time and again over the millennia, they would have a central identity to build it around. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. We'll stop here this week with Otto passing away in the year 1002. Poland is relatively secure, Bolesław is temporarily at peace with the Holy Roman Empire, and things are looking up. Let's see how long that lasts. I'll see you next week.